Dunnage, you grew up.
You got old. Myrtle Dunnage is back.
Haven't seen her since she was a kid. Wonder how she turned out.
How's my mother?
Molly doesn't get out much.
I don't know why you've come to this hole.
Who lives at Mad Molly's now?
She's back! The murderess is back!
I need to remember the truth.
They say that she killed a boy.
So where did you go from here?
I worked in London, Milan, and Paris.
I reckon you came home for one of two things. Revenge or me.
Gertrude Pratt. The dance is Saturday night.
A dress can't change anything.
Watch and learn, Gertrude. Watch and learn. I can make you the most striking girl in the room. Take your clothes off.
A murderer and a lesbian.
Stunning.
You can transform people.
Use it.
Tilly Dunnage? I remember that day. She saw the whole thing.
She murdered him. She's cursed.
I didn't do it.
It's just a pack of lies.
They'll never forgive me for that boy's death.
You're wasted here.
Stop it, Sergeant. With what? Sitting?
Why didn't you tell me?
You don't scare me, Tilly Dunnage.
Tilly Dunnage, you've enriched my life.
I reckon you can make some bloke pretty happy.
You could be married in this suit, snapped up by some eligible spinster or hag.
G'day, mates. Richard the Film Geek here, and I'm here in a bit of an Australian mood to give you guys my review of the 2015 Aussie black comedy The Dressmaker, which was adapted from the best-selling 2000 Rosalie Ham debut novel of the same name by Jocelyn Moorhouse, who not only returns to the director's chair herself for the first time in nearly 20 years, but also co-wrote the screenplay with her director husband, PJ Hogan, who directed Muriel's Wedding, My Best Friend's Wedding, Confessions of a Shopaholic, and of course the 2003 live-action adaptation of Peter Pan, and stars Kate Winslet, Judy Davis, Liam Hemsworth, Hugo Weaving, and Sarah Snook. The story of The Dressmaker, which, on a minor side note, the director herself basically describes as Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven with a sewing machine, takes place in a fictional backward Australian outback town named Dungatar in 1951, and we follow the titular dressmaker, Myrtle Tilly Dunnage, played by Kate Winslet, who returns to her hometown after a 25-year exile to care for, look after, and reunite with her mentally ailing mother Molly, played by Judy Davis. Whilst doing so, she starts to fall in love with her childhood best friend Teddy, played by Liam Hemsworth, confronts her past by solving the mystery of why she was separated from her mother as a child and driven out of town in the first place, and practically uses the dressmaking skills she obtained during her time in Paris as a sweet revenge weapon against the local town bastards and bitches who had wronged and accused her of the historic murder of a fellow classmate. So, in other words, for all intents and purposes, and obviously minus the certain obsession with animal and particularly Dalmatian fur, this is basically the origin story of Cruella de Vil before, well, Cruella came out in 2021. So now that I've just seen the movie for the first time, here are my thoughts on the Dressmaker. While I wouldn't quite go as far to say this movie is a masterpiece or anything, and while I do acknowledge and concede that this movie is not going to be for everyone, largely due to it being so uniquely and distinctly Australian, as well as its occasionally broad, messy, all over the place in terms of tone, but yet charmingly strange, weird, kooky, eccentric, out there, almost Tim Burton-esque quirky nature, which on another minor side note to those people is a perfectly fine opinion to have if that's the case, more power to you. And thus you'd probably expect this to be the type of movie I should really find myself hating with a burning passion. That is just not the case here. I actually really legit like this movie, maybe even love it. Yes, it is campy, silly and ridiculous, in a similar vein to something like Muriel's Wedding or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, or Strictly Ballroom even. Yes, it can feel tonally random, messy, and all over the place at times, especially as far as this script by Jocelyn Moorhouse and PJ Hogan is concerned. And yes, it goes completely off the rails and careers its way wildly across multiple genres: epic western, costume drama, black comedy, revenge thriller, character drama, Shakespearean tragedy, romance, mystery, horror, and so many others to count. But despite all its few flaws, I love that this film knowingly embraces what it is. It doesn't pretend to be anything else. It doesn't take itself seriously. And most importantly, you can tell that everyone involved, cast and crew alike, are just having a ton of fun making this movie. It can also be surprisingly brutal with its violence and dark when it needs to be. And as weird as this is for me to say, this is coming from someone who went into this movie with an open mind, to be sure, but also pretty darn excited to see how this was going to turn out. Let's talk about the acting first, which is near flawless across the board. The three standouts in particular being Kate Winslet, Judy Davis, and Hugo Weaving. Starting off with Kate Winslet, first of all, I mean, crikey. Even when she's in a bad movie, it is genuinely like she can do no wrong. Almost each and every one of the performances this girl has given throughout her extraordinary career has been consistently incredible. From her debut performance in Heavenly Creatures to Sense and Sensibility, Titanic, Iris, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Finding Neverland, Steve Jobs, Avatar: The Way of Water, even something as hard-hitting as, say, Revolutionary Road or Carnage, or her Oscar-winning turn in The Reader especially. And I am very happy to report that her performance here as Tilly Dunnage is no exception. And I would probably even go as far to say that this is one of her most underrated roles. I swear to God, she is fantastic in this movie. Not only does she make it seem like she was born to play such a complex character like this, and not only does she nail her Australian accent so damn impressively and convincingly, but from the moment she makes her badass entrance during the awesome opening where she steps out of the bus with her Singer sewing machine to hand, lifts her head to glance around this dirty little town she's just returned to, lights up a cigar and announces the very first line of this movie.
I'm back, you bastards.
From then to the end of the movie, you instantly find yourself rooting for her to go after these detestable SOBs, to make sweet mincemeat out of them, and just give them nothing but hell with every gorgeously designed dress she wears and makes throughout the movie, which I'll get into a little bit later in the video. Plus her chemistry with Judy Davis is just brilliant and makes for some of the most tender, touching and heartfelt moments between mother and daughter matter in this entire movie. Speaking of Judy Davis as Molly, there isn't really anything more for me to say that hasn't already been said, other than hers is another fantastic performance in the movie. She just practically steals every scene she is in, and I would contend that 95% of the dark humour and comedy in here is not just down to the script, but also especially down to some of the wickedly funny and bonkers one-liners her character gives throughout the film, such as this.
A murderer and a lesbian.
As for Hugo Weaving, I remember the moment I found out he was playing a cross-dressing police officer in this movie, and I not only reacted with shocked laughter to this, but I honestly had no idea at first what was more ridiculous, yet at the same time hilarious about this. Either the fact that his character's name was Sergeant Farrett, which is almost like jokingly saying Sergeant Ferret, by the way. I'm sorry. Or the idea that his character just loved to wear nice frocks, because at least up to that point I've always been more familiar with this guy playing British revolutionaries, or rather voicing said British revolutionaries, like the titular character in V for Vendetta, or villainous black-suited agents with sunglasses like Agent Smith from the Matrix films, or even regal elf leaders like Elrond in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies. And as far as I'm personally aware, he presumably played a similar character to this in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So his role here naturally caught me off guard, because this was literally unlike any other performance I have seen Hugo Weaving give before. And yet, saying all this, it somehow greatly surprises me that he manages to make this particular performance work so tremendously well. The dude is clearly having the time of his life here, an absolute ball, and he really relishes with absolute aplomb the opportunity to wear all these extravagant, frilly costumes, just such an unexpectedly camp and bizarre, but enjoyable and fun to watch performance here from Hugo Weaving. Sarah Snook has a really nice little supporting role here as one of the town ladies named Gertrude, who instantly takes somewhat of a reluctant fascination with Tilly's little dressmaking business and asks her to help design a dress to make her stand out during a dance before her big wedding. The rest of the support cast, mostly consisting of native Australian actors I haven't really heard of before, except maybe perhaps for Barry Otto, who is actually the father of Miranda Otto, Eowyn herself from Lord of the Rings, all do such a great job as well of portraying these scummy townsfolk who you just really cannot help but love to hate throughout this thing, and thus really root for them to get the comeuppance that they so richly deserve. However, if there is only one weak link I have to point out within this cast, it would almost certainly be Liam Hemsworth as Teddy. Don't get me wrong though, this has absolutely nothing to do with some ludicrous personal bias I have towards him. I actually quite like him in the Hunger Games films, for example, and he doesn't even give a terrible or bad performance in the movie per se. He's actually okay. He is likeable enough, and I guess his chemistry with Kate Winslet is kinda decent, even despite the fact that we're supposed to buy that their characters are meant to be roughly exactly the same age. But I always somehow get the impression that he was cast just because they wanted someone handsome and swoon-worthy. Plus, when you watch him in this movie, it's almost as if he isn't entirely as relaxed or confident to be there as he probably needed to be, and at times it even looks like he's just reading and or murmuring his lines off of a script instead of actually saying his lines with any real conviction, enthusiasm, or charisma. Even though I'm not exactly as familiar with Jocelyn Moorhouse's work as I am with her husband's, I have yet to check out Muriel's Wedding and Confessions of a Shopaholic, despite only seeing the trailer. But I do remember My Best Friend's Wedding to be really good, and Peter Pan 2003 is one of my personal favourite adaptations of that story. I have to say that she does a surprisingly great directing job here, not to even mention the striking cinematography by Donald McAlpine, as well as David Hirschfelder's awesome Morricone-esque score. I must also give firm props to Marion Boyce and Margot Wilson for designing the costumes in this movie, and am of the firm opinion that the Academy should have at least given them a nomination for Best Costume Design, because these period accurate costumes are just gorgeous and stunning to look at. And I really especially love that they become almost like another character in the movie, and particularly help to bring some much needed colour, life and vibrancy to this otherwise rather dreary, washed out, dead looking beige town. Even the outback locations, the sets and the production design are all great. You really feel like you're in this decaying town that is stuck in the past, almost terminally unable to move with the times, collapsing in on itself, eating itself rotten from the inside. It almost looks like a more depressing, run-down, bleak, and almost apocalyptic outback wasteland version of Belle and Maurice's little town from Beauty and the Beast, which in turn serves as a visual explanation to the audience for Tilly's motivation, and makes you completely understand and sympathise with where she's coming from and why she despises this crummy little town who basically fucked her life up anyway for seemingly no reason whatsoever, so much that she would literally want to just see it crumble and burn, which in turn is what makes the ending to this movie, where, mini spoiler alert by the way in case you haven't seen the movie, Tilly rolls out a red carpet outside her house, douses both the entire house and the carpet with gasoline, and proceeds to set it alight, which then causes the entire town to burn to the ground. So she essentially commits arson, in other words, before departing on the train back to Paris with the closing line,
You never met the rubbish.
such a Schwarzenegger-esque one-liner, by the way. So unusual, bizarre, out of left field, shockingly violent and dark, but at the same time, all the more extremely cathartic and satisfying. In conclusion, I had such a surprisingly fun and enjoyable blast with The Dressmaker. Of course I know it's not a film that's going to be to everyone's liking, and again, that's a perfectly fine opinion for you to have if that's the case, more the merrier. Likewise, if you like this film as much as I do, that's fine too. even if you're curious to want to check out this film for the first time, that's absolutely fine too. And I would very much definitely highly recommend this film to you if you're into revenge thrillers, if you're into comedies, or if you're a fan of Kate Winslet, or if you're even a fan of Australian cinema in general. And with all that being said, the overall rating I'm going to give The Dressmaker is an 8 out of 10. Don't forget to do the following few things as always. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on The Dressmaker. Subscribe to my channel. Click on the little bell to receive any emailed notifications and or updates from my channel. If you haven't already, you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd and Blue Sky. Do take care everyone, and hooray!